When I work with clients helping them prepare for interview, one of the areas we obviously focus on is putting together some answers, or as I like to phrase it, the scaffolding of answers for some probable and possible interview questions. Now, some questions you're almost guaranteed to be asked. Questions around your strengths, or why have you applied for this role, or how do you see yourself adding value in the organisation. They're probable questions. But there's really only one question that you're guaranteed to be asked, and that's the question we're going to look at in this short video. And the question is, do you have any questions? It's the question that the interviewer asks you towards the close of the interview. It's your opportunity to ask some questions. So how do you deal with it? There are three ways we can approach this opportunity. Obviously, if you have a genuine question that you want to ask the question. Maybe it's something that you have thought about the organisation, or that you were unclear of when you were doing your preparation and research. Or maybe it's something that's naturally come up during the course of the interview, where maybe the interviewers have made comment or reference about something and you're curious about it and you want to gain more information. As well, if you think about an interview, most of the questions are coming from the interviewers because they're trying to gather information to make an informed decision, and that informed decision is whether you're the right or not the right candidate for the role. But equally, you're looking to gather information so you can make a decision as to whether this organisation is a right fit for you. So if you have some genuine questions that you're looking to ask, this is the time that you ask them. One area that I would advise people to avoid, though, is trying to come up with a question just for the sake of coming up with a very smart or intellectually challenging question. Most interviewers will see through that for what it is, an attempt to look good. So it needs to be genuine, it needs to be authentic. Sometimes it's nice to have thought about a question in advance, and it might be something to do with the learning and development opportunities, or what would be the expectations for someone who was successful in the role. Another area to avoid are questions that are maybe a little bit too personal for the interviewers. I've had a client recently say to me, could I ask the interviewer something like, what do you enjoy about working here, or what motivates you at work? And in most scenarios, that question is not really appropriate for the vast majority of interviews. So the first way we can deal with this question of, do you have any questions, is if you've got a genuine question to ask and you ask it. But there are other ways we can use this opportunity as well. Let me share them with you. When the tables are turned at the end of the interview and the interviewer asks you, do you have any questions? We can seize this as a moment for maybe mopping up an answer to a question from earlier in the interview. Let me explain. Supposedly you're asked a question on a particular topic, maybe it's leadership, and you gave an answer to it. But almost as soon as you finished the answer, you remembered one or two additional things that you would have liked to have shared, or maybe an example to draw on. You can use this time at the end of the interview to reference back to that. But because it's not, strictly speaking, a question that you're asking, you need to ask permission to do that. So you might phrase it something like, well, I don't have any questions per se, but do you remember a few moments ago you asked me about leadership? One or two additional things popped into my head. Would it be okay to share them with you now? In the vast majority of cases, the interviewers will go, yes, by all means, go ahead. When we choose to seize this opportunity at the end of the interview in this way, I think it simply means that we're not leaving the interview having regretted not saying something. So it is an opportunity to do a little bit of mopping up of an answer. But of course, you can only do it once. You can't refer back to every question that you've been asked in the previous 40 minutes. The third way we can use this opportunity at the end of, when the interviewer asks you any questions, is an extension of the previous point. It tends to be more relevant with more senior positions. So supposedly over the course of an interview, you're very aware of 4 or 5 key points you want to make, or 4 or 5 key things you want the interviewer to know about you. And maybe during the interview, in the natural flow of conversation, you didn't get an opportunity to refer to one of those. Maybe it was a particular competency, for example. Now, this would rarely happen, particularly if the interviewers are well prepared. But again, you don't want to leave the interview having regretted not saying something. So perhaps you could deal with this opportunity something like this. So the interviewer asks you if you have any questions, and you may have one or you may not, but then you might say something like, well, I don't have any questions as such, and you may have gathered sufficient information on this topic already, but you might notice from my CV that I worked here, or that I feel as I've a particular strength in this area. Is there anything else you need to know about that? So again, you're doing it in a very gentle way because you don't want to be telling the interviewers their job, but equally you don't want to leave the interview not having put your best foot forward. Now, that question, do you have any questions, is asked towards the close of the interview, and whether you do or you don't, there is still an opportunity to close the interview strongly, to bookend it, as I would say. It's not necessarily about making a strong closing statement that makes the language sound a bit too formal, but you do want to, and you can consider in advance, one or two key points that you want to make so that you're leaving the interview in a positive way. I always think it's nice to thank the interviewers. So you might go something like, well, yeah, I don't have any questions, but I would like to take this opportunity of thanking you for calling me for interview. And I hope that my energy and enthusiasm for this job has come across, because I would love the opportunity of working here. Now, that's a very strong closing statement, but for it to work, it needs to flow, it needs to be conversational, it needs to be responsive to what's going on in the room beforehand. If it's too pre-planned, it can come across as a bit canned or insincere, and that doesn't do us any favours. But I think it is nice to thank the interviewers, and then to reinforce your enthusiasm for the role, and the fact that you would relish the opportunity of working with the company. So again, we can think about that in advance, so it means we're pre-planning how we want to close the interview. So I hope these few tips have been of benefit to you. It's an area that a lot of my clients have concerns about, and if you have an interview coming up, I wish you every success with it.